In this lesson, we'll take a look at how we can start to shape our polygon capsule using its components. So this is kind of where we left off with this bent sort of piece of geometry, which has now been made editable. So we can now edit this polygon. So we'll take a look at the different components that we can use to manipulate this. So let's say that we want to pull some geometry back. So we want to shape this a little bit. So one of the ways that we can do this is to access the polygons of the object. So you're going to find all of our different component modes down here. So we've got point mode, edge mode, and polygon mode. So if we'd like to select the individual polygons or faces, we can go ahead and activate that. Now we're in polygon mode, and we want to actually be able to select this. So our different selection methods are going to be located up here. We can use a rectangle marquee, a lasso selection, or a polygon selection, or a live selection, which will just allow us to kind of paint a selection. So I'm just clicking and dragging to paint a selection. You can see the polygons that I have selected are highlighted in orange. Okay, whenever we have our live selection activated, you're going to see that there are some attributes over here that we can change. Okay, one of the things that we can change, and one of the things to be aware of, is the fact that we can only choose to select things that are visible. So you can see here, if I drag across this object using the rectangle selection, it looks like everything is pretty much selected, but if I go around here, you can see all those faces that are facing the other way were not selected. Okay, that's because we have this only select visible elements turned on. If I turn that off and drag across, you can see it's going to get everything inside that box. So that's a setting that you need to be aware of a lot of times if you're going through and trying to select some things. Depending on how you have this set, it may or may not give you what you're looking for. You may want to be able to select all the way through an object, which in that case you may want to turn that off. Okay, so we're going to use live selection. So I'll just select these polygons at the end. You can see that the axis snaps to that. Now I want to move those back. So we're going to go and activate move. So we've got the polygon mode, and now we're using move. Now you can see that the axis currently isn't really situated the way that we might want. We can change our axis by going into the modeling axis. Okay, and we want it to be oriented around selected. But I'm going to go ahead and change this to a world orientation. And so now I can just drag this back by clicking on this red handle, drag it back in the X. Okay, so I can go ahead and pull this back. Now we can also select edges. So if we want to go to edge mode, let's select the edge mode, and then I can select edges. Now if I'm in the move tool, I can actually double click on this edge to select an entire loop. Going back into live selection, it doesn't work like that. But if I'm in move, I can go ahead, just double click on this, and then I can sort of move it around. I can also come in here and scale it up or down. Okay, so we can transform edges as well as polygons. Let's do the same thing down here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab these polygons, the base here, and I'm going to go ahead and pull these down in the Y, and down here. Can actually also rotate these. So I'll go ahead and rotate it. Now let's say I want to grab these edges, and I can rotate these, and so you can see that we can really begin to add some shape to our model. Okay, say we want to widen this base out a little bit. Maybe we also want to come in here and scale up this bottom part a little bit. We can do that as well. Okay, now as we come up in here, you can see that we don't have a lot of geometry inside here. So what we can do is actually add some more geometry. So I'm going to actually take this and let's scale it down a little bit in the Y, move it down slightly. Let's do the same thing here. Scale this down a little bit. I want it to be a little bit more flat up here on the top. Now I want to add some extra resolution in here. So when we're in one of these component modes and we right click, we're going to get a menu that's going to give us a lot of the tools that are available with whatever component we have selected. Okay, we can also access these tools by coming up under mesh, and then there are a lot of these tools in here, okay, that we can access. All right, so I want to use the knife. So I'm going to go to a polygon selection and go down to knife using right click. You can see the hotkey combinations for that are MK or K. And so if we wanted to just access that, we could just hit K. That brings up our knife tool. You can see those knife attributes here. Okay. Now we can add lines individually. I want to add an entire loop. So I'm going to change this mode to loop. Okay. And I'm going to turn off restrict to selection. And now you can see that I can come in here and I can click to add a loop. Now one thing to be aware of is that if I drag to a certain location and I hit shift, I can actually put a numerical value in here for the offset. So if I want it perfectly in the center, I can hit 50%. Okay. And then I can go ahead, click in the viewport to complete that. Let's go ahead and again go back to edges. Now we can take this new edge and we can scale it up a little bit. We can move it up. And we can also select points. So let's go to point mode and see what that looks like. So in this case, I find it easier to use the rectangle selection. So I'll drag across these points. Now you can see that I'm only selecting the visible points. And so I want to make sure that I go back in and turn off only select visible elements. That way I can select the entire thing. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and rotate this a little bit. Let's kind of scale it up. Okay, and then we can just start to do a little bit of shaping. So if we wanted to just grab these points on the bottom, you can see that goes all the way through. We can start to come up in here and start to just add a little bit more shape to our pod. So just have a little fun with this. Use the different component modes. Okay, take advantage of the points, the edges, and the polygons in order to add a little bit of shape. It doesn't have to look just like mine, but you can pull some areas out, add a little bit more resolution with the knife tool, and then go ahead and begin to add a little bit more shape to it. Now, another thing that we can do is to start to extrude in different parts. And so let's say we want to add kind of an inset here. So we'll go ahead and select those polygons back here. And let's say I want to add kind of a rim back here. So I'll right click and we want to go to extrude inner, and you can see the hotkey combination for that. So we'll do extrude inner and I'll click and drag, and you can see it's pulling those polygons in and making a nice little rim there. Okay, you can see the values over here. We can change the offset. If you want to have more divisions, you can set those there as well. I'm just going to give it a little bit of thickness. I want to have preserve groups on so that all these polygons are treated as one. Now I'm going to push this back into the model. So instead of extrude inner, we're going to use regular extrude. So hit extrude, and this time just click and drag to push that back in, and you can change the offset here. Again, if you want to add subdivisions, you can. I would turn create caps off because otherwise it's going to create geometry up here on the cap. In some cases, if you're adding thickness to a piece, this you need to turn this on. In this case, we don't want this on. We want to make sure to preserve groups. Okay, let's do the same thing down here. So again, remember we select those. Let's do an extrude inner. Give it a little bit of thickness. Let's do an extrude, push it back into the surface. And there we go. Now let's say we want to add a little bit of detail in here. Okay. So let's go ahead and take this edge loop and we'll double click on it. Let's right click and let's choose bevel. So now I'm going to click and drag just a little bit on that edge, and you can see it's splitting that one edge into two edges. Okay. So I'll go ahead and spread those out a little bit. Let's do the same thing up here. Go ahead and click on bevel. Okay, now you can see that we've got a little bit of crossover in here, so let's fix that. We'll go to point mode, and now I want to move these points along the surface. Okay, so let's go ahead and select the points that we want to move. So we've got some geometry crossing over that we don't want. And so we'll go into our modeling axis, and the orientation we'll choose will be normal. And then This will allow us to kind of move it along the surface and out along its normal if we want to. And so we can select these, move it along the surface to kind of clean that up a little bit. And then we can move these down. Okay, and then if we want to add a little bit more geometry, we can always go in with our knife and add another loop in here. We'll set that to 50% and add that loop in there. Okay, so just do a little bit of shaping with this, using the points, using the edges, and using the polygons to get the shape that you want. In the next lesson, we'll take a look at how we can start to detail this even more. So we'll start to extrude out some bits on the side, define where the sort of the canopy is going to be, and start to shape this a little bit more. So we'll go ahead and do that next.